welcome to our second session. The moderators are the Professor Melina Paisидov from the Thessaloniki University of Aristotle and me, Ralica Ruseva from Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. Our first paper is from Iva Doseva, photographs from the archives of Stefan Boyadjiev, a Roman architectural details as Polion in early Byzantine construction. Before to start with the paper of Iva Doseva, I would like to say that the inspiration of the subject of these art readings coming from Iva Doseva. The theme about the archives and art. The copyright belongs to Iva Doseva. Iva Doseva, you're welcome to present your paper. In Bulgarian.
Трябва да натисна сега да го увелича. Уважаеми колеги, ще разгледам два паметника, единственото свидетелство за които са фотографии от лични архиви. В рамките на проекта Bizart, благодарение на който бе създадена в най-богатите колекции от дигитализирани материали, отнасящи се до византийската култура, имах възможност да се запозная с част от съхраняваният в Института за изследване на изкуствата архив на професор архитект Стефан Бояджиев. Наследниците на професора бяха дарили архива на института чрез съдействието на колегата доктор Станислав Станев. Трудно е да представя само с няколко думи професор Бояджиев, но все пак ерудит, блестящ изследовател на ранновизантийската и средновековната архитектура, теренист, за когото сякаш нямаше недостъпни места. Понякога скандализиращ със смелите си възгледи, наричан подвижна енциклопедия. Ентусиазиран фотограф, заснемащ всичко, което намира за съществено, независимо дали пряко се отнася до проучванията му. Докато работех с архива, безчетни фотографии, безценни от информативна гледна точка за обекти из цяла България и извън нея, множество от тях несъществуващи в автентичния си вид, 3 фотографии привлякаха вниманието ми. Те документират един архитектурен елемент. Съдейки по другите фотографии от кутията, в която бяха тук разглежданите, елементът вероятно произхожда от калиакра. Такъв е произходът съгласно описите в платформата на Bizart. За съжаление, паметника не фигурира в фондовете под юрисдикцията на Исторически музей Варна, включително и резерват Калиакра, както и на повечето музеи по българското крайбрежие. Практически той би могъл да бъде от всякъде. Според ионистката кима, простираща се по протежение на блока, той би трябвало да е заемал хоризонтална позиция, т.е. да е носен в дадена архитектурна конструкция. Обикновено този тип украса се разполага от край до край на елементите и на целите конструкции, които те съставят. Тук обаче фриза в десния си край е прекъснат от друг тип орнамент. Затова възникват съмнения относно целия вид на елемента и функцията му. Прекъсването на кимата напомня на друг паметник. Фотографията му бе представена преди години от археоложката доцент, доктор на историческите науки Виолета Димова, също забележителна личност, поставила началото на системното изследване на червен на остров Свети Иван при Созопол. Става въпрос за мраморен детал от острова, също с ионистка кима, но и с каноничните за украсата на корнизите астрагал и дентикули под нея. Тези орнаментални фризове са разположени върху силно скосеното лице на блока. Десният му край не е отсечен, а върху лицето му е разположено изображение на гирлянда. Въпреки всички особености, по-убедено би го определил като корниз. Тъй като двата паметника са приблизително сходни по дата, структура и размери, украса с юнийска кима, прекъсваща поне в единия си край, предполагам, че са с идентична функция и са корнизи. Главните отлики помежду им са в пластичното третиране и в вторичните намеси. Цялата повърхност и отделните елементи на корниза от Свети Иван са твърде грубо и схематично изсечени в по-нисък релеф, което предполага незавършен стадий на работа. Наличието на дентикули подсказва времето преди края на II век. Изображения на гирлянди често се срещат в римското изкуство, а в контекста на настоящия случай са сред основните мотиви в краста на фризовете, които лежат под корнизите и над архитравите в римските подпокривни конструкции. При паметника от архива на Бояджиев видът на самата кима е конвенционален. Овалите са много добре изваяни, дълбоко са вдълбани в повърхността. Върховете са свързани с чрупките чрез тънки пръчици, които се приемат като датираш белег, насочваш към втората половина на II век. Ако мястото на растителния елемент е необичайно, ето тук, самият му вид, доколкото личи, е разпространен из римската, но и ранно-византийската архитектурна скулптура. Най-интересни са детайлите, удостоверяващи вторично обработване в резултат на вторична употреба. Под кимата е оформена плоскост, която продължава и отчасти по периферията на двете къси страни. Всъщност това е повърхността на елемента при първоначалния му вид, а участъците около нея са отнети в процеса на преработване. Двата му края са разбовани и показват, че е приспособен да взема вертикална позиция, т.е. носената му функция е преобразувана в носеща. Като се вземат предвид заоблянето, поне на видимите ръбове, врязаните пръстени в едната вече долната част, както и акантовите листа на горната, става ясно, че блокът е превърнат в колонка с висока база и едноредов корински капител, напълно в стила на ранно-византийската архитектурна скулптура. Колони с подобен размер и окраса, с характерни за олтарните прегради, но плоската хоризонтална ивица е присъща на двойните междупрозорични колонки. Забележителен е приложеният подход при трансформирането на блока. Необходимите елементи, база и капител са скулптирани върху кимата, сякаш без всякакво съобразяване с нея. Орнаментите от двата периода изглеждат като насложени фотографски образи. Напротив, при моделирането на ствола на кимата е добре запазена. Дали паметникът, предполагаемо произхожда от калиакра и преизползван точно в църковна сграда, никога няма да е ясно, но със сигурност корнизът от острова е произхождал от монументална римска сграда. Свети Иван е свещена територия, определена за култови сгради. Въпреки че не са известни археологически доказателства, не може да се изключи възможността корнизът да е бил сполия в някои от църквите там. Особено като си има предвид, че една от тях е издигната върху основите на ранно-византийска църква в интериора на другата, конхалната, от втората половина на 13 век, с открити и други сполии, някои от които известни само от личния архив на Виолета Димова. Ще направя едно отклонение към много голямата тема за сполиите. Сполиум означава военна плячка, одрана кожа на животно, а терминът спрямо изкуството, както много други, дължим на Ренесанса. Тогава вграждането в средновековни сгради на антични скулптурни детайли е възприемано като акт на похищение, плячкосничество. Според ренесансовите хуманисти, ограбването на класическите сгради е сравнимо с лишаването на животно от кожата му. Всъщност детайлите, дори и целите скулптурни композиции, които са вграждани в представителни сгради или са излагани по площади, в множество случаи са именно военни трофеи. Съвременната концепция за сполиите се отнася до повторно използвани елементи, които са отделени от даден ансамбъл и са включени в нов контекст, който се отличава от първоначалния във функционално и естетическо отношение. За първи път последователно сполия, а не рециклиран материал, са използвани в строежите на Константин Велики. При вграждането им в нови структури се изтъква идеята за съхранението, опазването на културното наследство, макар и в духа на пропагандирания традиционализъм. Интригуващ е и въпросът за легализирането постфакум на ограбването на стари сгради и установяването на имперски монопол върху материалите. Без да навлизам в подробности, паралелно с забраните на този вид грабежи, в законите се оставя врата, допускаща при използването на материали с заявената цел за тяхното съхранение. Важното е, че късноантичната повторна употреба е рационално планирана процедура, обхващаща всеки етап от процеса – демонтиране, депониране и доставянето на каменните изделия на строителния обект. Тъй като отвъд закономерностите, изборът на по-стари елементи зависи от случайното им наличие, всеки отделен случай представлява интерес и би допринесъл за допълване на обща картина. Днеска ми беше изключително приятно да видя Споли в презентацията за остров Патмос, както и в музея в Тирана. Тъй като паметникът от архива на Бояджиев е представител на онези материали, при чието вторично използване е променена функцията, а за тази цел той е в степен преобразуван. Този подход може би е сравнително по-рядък. Масово архитектоничните елементи, колони, бази, капители се използват според предназначението си без промяна. Примерите са множество, само ще кажа, че при систематизирането им намирам за най-подходящо съпоставянето на критериите предназначение и преобразуване. Относно паметника от архива на Димова, известно ми е настоящото местонахождение само на една част. Тя е вградена в съвременна частна сграда в Созопол. Практически паметникът е унищожен и информацията за него е затрита. Каква врата е отворена? Не е ясно. Но за да не излизам отвъд рамките на научната дискусия, бих казала, че това е сполия именно в смисъла влаган от ренесансовите ценители на изкуството плячка. И ще завърша с още един въпрос, за който разглежданите обекти са само повод. Ако паметниците, бъдещи споли, се намират в руинирани сгради или в депа за материали, то те не са ли един вид архив, артефакти излезли употреба, съхраняване по специфичен начин, съдържащи определена информация? А повторното им използване в нови структури не е ли вид деархивиране? Благодаря ви за вниманието.
Dr. Ivadosova, for all this precious material that you have shown to us. Let's go to the second speech of Elina Anastasova, за няколко римски паметника с пропаганда символика от колекцията на Рим Стара Загора. About several Roman monuments with propaganda symbolism from the collection of the Regional Museum of History, Stara Zagora.
Thank you. Hello, colleagues, dear colleagues. Здравейте, колеги! В следващите минути ще ви представя няколко релефа от римския период, съхранявани в фонда на Регионален исторически музей Стара Загора. Това, което ги отличава от останалите паметници на римското изкуство, открити на територията на днешна България, е тяхната иконография, натоварена с пропагандна символика. Въпреки че някои от релефите са първично публикувани преди повече от 100 години, те не са детайлно анализирани. Неизяснени остават техният стил, датировка, предполагаем контекст, близки паралели и символика, които биха допринесли за изучаване на изкуството и историята на античния град Августа Траяна. Поради тези причини е необходимо те да бъдат пуснати в научно обращение отново. Това са паметниците, за които ще стане въпрос. Двойният образ на крилата женска фигура в полет е иконографията, която присъства върху релеф с умалено изображение на порта, фрагмент от фронтон с релефни образи и частично запазена плоча с фигурална композиция, които се съхраняват във фонда на този музей. На първо място ще разгледам първоъгълен релеф с изображение на архитектурен паметник, интерпретиран по различен начин. Според едни изследователи това е модел на крепостна порта, а според други това е тържествена врата. Така наречената порта е свободно стояща и по нищо не личи да е част от крепостна стена. Пространството около нея също не дава информация за нейната функция. Изобразеният архитектурен паметник се отличава с детайлно представена фасада, В горната му част има триъгълен фронтон, чийто тимпан е декориран с розети и растителни орнаменти. Антефиксът му е украсен с палмета. Антаблеманът има сложен профил, а под него следват две колони с гладка повърхност, които са допълнени от капител, и база, под която има профилиран постамент, декориран с венец. Проходът на вратата е оформен като арка, а в центъра е представен и ключов камък. Това, което е интересно за паметника, е, че в пространството над арката, така наречените спандрели, има релефни изображения, така наречения двоен образ на крилата женска фигура, която поднася релеф. Към момента изображенията не са така добре запазени, но ето тук може да погледнете венеца, който се поднася. Така. Вторият паметник, с който ще ви запозная, е бил част от плоча с доста по-големи размери. От нея са запазени само 3 фрагмента от огледално представен женски персонаж в полет. От него липсват главите, стъпалата, част от ръцете. В случая само външната ръка на тази фигура е запазена, като тя е била поднесена към бедрото на фигурата. Така. Безръкавната дреха, с която облечен персонажа, е детайлно скулптирана. Тя има V-образно деколте, подчертано от диагонални дипли. Препасана е под гърдите, като там се образуват плавни и дълбоко всечени гънки, които подчертават бюста. Върху ханша гънките са по-плоски представени. Имайки предвид ето тези гънки тук, може да се предположи, че краката на фигурата са били свити в коленете. Така, в първичната публикация се споменава, че фигурите са държали широк дъговиден венец, а под него е имало трета, недобре запазена фигура, изпълнена във висок релеф. За съжаление, този паметник е открит в частен имот и собственикът първоначално е отказал да го предаде в музея. Компромисният вариант, до който са достигнали преди повече от 100 години, е ето тези 2 фрагмента от релефа да бъдат пренесени в музея. Паметникът е бил разделен на части, а въпросният дъговиден венец с третата фигура е бил оставен на госпожа Маджарова за домашни нужди. Така. От даденото описание може да се съди, че археолозите не са видели релефа в цялостния му запазен вид. Затова свидетелства и отсъствието на описание на лицата на персонажите, позиция на ръцете и описание на позицията на стъпалата им. Не е известно как е изобразена третата фигура, дали е била в бюстов формат или в цял ръст и какви са били приблизителните й размери. Няма подробности по отношение на въпросния широк венец с дъговидна форма. Всички тези обстоятелства ще анализирам по-късно при коментара за предполагаемия контекст на паметника. На последно място ще ви запозная с фронтон, с няколко релефни изображения върху него. Както виждате, тук отново се открива двойния образ на крилата женска фигура, поднасяща венец, към бюстов образ на жена с корински шлем. Така. Без съмнение, върху 3 паметника е изобразена персонификацията на победата Нике Виктория, чийто прототип е скулптурата на Нике от Пеони. Това, което се знае за тази скулптура е, че тя е поставена пред светилището на Зевс в Олимпия с цел да се ознаменува военна победа с дата в 425 година. Скулптурата на богинята е умело изваяна, тялото е представено в полет, а драперията на пеплуса нежно подчертава извивките на тялото. Предполага се, че в едната си ръка Нике е поднасяла венец, което допълва образа и на гарант на победата. Иконография, която често пъти е използвана с пропагандни цели от гръцките полиси, елинистически владетели, а по-късно и от римските императори. Римският аналог на Нике се нарича Виктория. Въпреки сходната им иконография, римляните считали Виктория за вестител на вече настъпилата победа. Обикновено тя е представена в полет, изправена, поднасяща венец към главата на императора. Тя може да увенчава също персонификацията на Рим, Рома, може да увенчава щандарт, военен трофей и паладиум. Така, що се касае до двойния образ на богинята Виктория през римския период, както виждате, той се появява върху спандрелите на триумфални и почетни арки, върху ниши фронтон от храма на Фортуна от Ескос, статуи на императори, римски монети, линтели на врати и корнизи и саркофази. Накратко ще ви ги представя. Иконографията, фигурата е представена по сходен начин, но към нея могат да се добавят различни атрибути. Ето, може да погледнете. Двойният образ на Виктория се появява и при така наречените почетни арки, които не са издигнати от името на Сената. Въпреки това, тази характерна иконография не се появява върху всички почетни арки. Тя е добре представена върху така наречената ниша от светилището на Баал Шамин в Палмира, за която ще стане въпрос по-късно. Също така е част от портата на Херкулес в Ефес. Този релеф е с полия и е преизползван в тази порта. Както казахме, открива се и като част от декорацията на тимпана на храма на Фортуна в Ескос. Открива се също при статуите на императори, монетни изображения, линтели на врати. За съжаление, те са с неизвестен контекст. Това, което може да се каже за саркофазите, е, че това е най-разпространената иконография. Викториите поднасят щит с бюстови изображения на починали. Така, продължаваме нататък. В случая можем да приемем, че двойният образ на Виктория, поднасяща венец, е задължителен мотив, използван при декорацията на централния проход на триумфалните арки, които са вид пропаганден паметник. Те заемат важно място и в триумфалната процесия, която е устроена в чест на императора и неговите победи. Имайки предвид това, можем ли да говорим за наличие на триумфална арка в Августа Траяна, чийто модел стои пред нас върху този релеф? Когато говорим за триумфална арка през императорския период, трябва да отбележим, че тя по правило се издига от името на Сената на римския народ и съдържа различни елементи, като най-важните това са посветителния надпис, богата релефна декорация и скулптури. Така. Освен този вид арки, в римския свят арката като архитектурна форма е използвана, за да се маркира римското присъствие. Тя може да се използва може да се издигне след военна победа, при основаване на провинция или за да се отбележат границите на градската територия на някой римски град. Също така тя присъства при някои мостове и планински проходи. В градска среда е предпочитана при архитектурното оформление на базилики, градски порти, пропилеи, храмове и форуми, които маркират мястото, откъдето може да се премине. Съществуват и така наречените почетни арки, които са построени от името на градския сенат, болето и демоса на града или от частни лица, с цел да се отдаде почет на императора и на неговата династия, да се отбележат неговите победи или да се благодари за почестите, които император е дарил на града. Тяхната форма и декорация често копира триумфалните арки. И имайки предвид тези наблюдения, можем да отхвърлим тезата за наличие на триумфална арка в Августа Траяна. Така, в архитектурно отношение, въпросната порта, която е изобразена върху релефа от Фонда на Старозагорския музей, има общи черти с някои арки от първи век, но всички те имат различен контекст. В случая ви представям Августовата порта от Римини, която е посветена от Сената на римския император. Имаме пример за частен паметник, издигнат в чест на фамилията Гави от Верона първи век. Порта Ауреа от Равена, която е графично възстановена въз основа на описание от Плиний Стари и скици от 16 век. За нея мога да отбележа, че се счита, че е издигната след завръщането на Клавдий и празнуването на военен триумф в Британия. С култов контекст, вероятно маркира ето тази арка, за която се предполага, че е част от светилището на Изида в Рим. По отношение на арките от II век, най-близки паралели до нашия паметник откриваме при тетрапилона от Гераса, с дата в 180 година, но също така сходно оформление на фронтон, въпросната арка и двете колони откриваме и при арката на Хадриан от Ливан. Така. Въпреки това, Имайки предвид всичко казано до тук, можем да предположим, че релефът от Августа Траяна представлява модел на почетна арка. Но дали такава е съществувала в рамките на римския град? Така. Ако допуснем, че въпросният релеф, който е разделен на части, всъщност е декорирал подобна арка, трябва да направим няколко уточнения. Имайки предвид описанието на викториите в първичната публикация, може да предположим, че те са изобразени в полет диагонално напред. Характерно, в първичната публикация се споменава, че викториите държат венец с дъговидна форма. Характерно за тази иконография е, че викториите държат въпросният венец и с двете си ръце, както при фронтона от храма на Фортуна от Ескус. При релефа от Августа Траяна едната ръка на богинята Нике е била спусната покрай тялото, докато другата е била изнесена напред, подобно на триумфалните арки и модела на порта, който е разгледан по-горе. Поради тази причина можем да се усъмним в описанието на първичната публикация. Известно е, че под венеца е имало друга фигура, която е била изпълнена в висок релеф. Но не става ясно колко голяма е била тя и какви са характеристиките й. В случая това, което предполагам, че въпросният дъговиден венец всъщност представя отвора на арката, а третата фигура може да е била част от декорацията на ключовия камък на въпросната почетна арка, по подобие на арката на Септимий Север в Рим. Така. Въпреки това, фрагментарно запазения релеф от Августа Траяна намира паралели сред различни паметници. На първо място ще спомена така наречената ниша или вотивна ниша от светилището на Балшамин в Палмира. То е със сходна декорация, запазен е въпросния полукръгъл отвор на арката. Това, което авторите казват е, че той се открива в южната част на така наречения портик C3. Отбелязва се също, че не са открити колони или част от долната част на въпросната ниша, поради което аз предполагам, че вероятно е бил част от декорация на някакъв проход. Добър паралел в случая е въпросната порта на Херкулес от Ефес. Този детайл е преизползван в нея. Вероятно също става въпрос за почетна арка с по-ранна дата от този римски град. От всичко казано до тук можем да допуснем, че по-големия релеф с двете виктории е бил част от реално съществуваща арка, посветена на победите на някой римски император или издигната във връзка с императорското посещение в града. Добър пример за това би била трипроходната арка от Филипопол, която се счита, че е построена в чест на визитата на император Хадриан в този римски град. На последно място ще обърна внимание на фрагмента от фронтон с релефна декорация. Акцентът тук е поставен върху бюстовия образ, който е с по-големи размери и същевременно той е увенчан от двете виктории. В първичната публикация той е определен като Атина, а паметникът е разпознат като надгробен. Въпреки това ще ви представя малко по-различна иконография. Имайки предвид, че въпросният шлем е присъщ на образа на Атина Минерва, вторият вариант за идентификация на тази фигура е с образа на персонификацията на Рим, Рома. Нейната иконография е силно повлияна от тази на богинята Атина, обстоятелство, което учените отдават на желанието на атинския полис да установи близки контакти с римляните. Най-ранните паметници с лика на Рома датират от края на 3-ти, началото на 2 век преди Христа. Този процес е допълнен от издигане на храм на богинята Рома в съседство на Партенона, а след победата в битката при Акциум се слага началото на почитането на Рома и Август, но само в провинциите на изток. Така, защо смятам, че този персонаж е Рома? Има много добри паралели, що се касае до начина на оформяне на въпросния шлем. Ето тези ремъци, които виждате, те са частично запазени естествено, много наподобяват на ето тези тук, върху базата на колона на император Марк Аврелий. Също така, добър пример за съчетаването на двойния образ на богинята Виктория с Рома откриваме върху императорска статуя. Що се касае до този люспест орнамент, предполагам, че той маркира плочките на броня. Ето тук давам един пример за изобразяване на Рома в броня, макар и да не е с такъв люспест мотив. Ето тук виждате още един пример за съчетаването на двойния образ на Виктория с този на Рома. Така. Приемайки, че това е идентификацията на бюстовия образ, логично е да се запитаме какъв паметник стои пред нас. Добър паралел в случая откриваме при фронтон с мраморна едикула, издигната от Центурион от 4-та кохорта в Рим през 130 година. Тази информация ни е известна благодарение на надписа, който е запазен. Известно ни е, че от Рим има още няколко подобни едикули, които са издигнати от военни лица, а според надписа на една от тях е известно, че в въпросната едикула е поставена статуя на гений. Въз основа на което предполагам, че в античния град Августа Траяна е имала сходна едикула. Дали тя е била издигната от военно лице, не мога да кажа, но имайки предвид, че в града има данни за построяване на храм в чест на Рома и Август, мога да предположа, че паметникът е бил издигнат там, без да имам конкретни доказателства за това, разбира се. Така, накратко ще маркирам датировката на паметниците. Въпросният маркет на почетна арка бих отнесла най-общо във II век, имайки предвид паралелите с тетрапилона от Гераса, но и арката от Ливан. Във втората половина на II век се отнася фрагментарно запазения релеф с двойния образ на Виктория, имайки предвид начина на скулптиране на драперията на дрехата, а с малко по-късна дата, до началото на III век, бихме датирали въпросния фрагмент от фронтон, имайки предвид по-скъсените пропорции на фигурите на Нике и начина на представяне на дрехата. Така, стигаме до изводите. Това, което можем да кажем в края на този доклад е, че в римския град Августа Траяна е имало различни по форма, стил и контекст паметници, носещи декорация с пропагандна символика, която е свързана с императорските победи, отражение на което е и двойния образ на Виктория, поднасяща венец. Въпреки че остават много неизяснени въпроси относно местоположението на тази почетна арка, на кой император е била посветена и какъв е бил повода за нейното издигане, дискусията остава отворена, а информацията ще бъде междувременно допълнена от бъдещите археологически проучвания и изследванията по темата. Благодаря ви за вниманието.
Благодаря на госпожа Анастасова за интересния доклад. Предполагам, че ще има дискусия. And now the next paper is new evidence for the lost inscription of Prince Boris I, Michael, from Balcha, from Albena Mikhailova, Angel Nikolov, and Белослава Вачковска. In English and Bulgarian? Български на английски?
English.
English, okay.
So, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, the inscription of Prince Boris Michael, found in the ruins of an early Christian basilica and medieval monastery near the village of Balch in southwestern Albania, is one of the most important sources regarding the Christianization of the Bulgarian people and the location of the location of the southwestern border of the first Bulgarian empire in the 9th century. It was found by chance during the First World War, when Austrian troops were digging up the ruins known by the local people as Saint Mary, to unearth building materials for trenches. The inscription related to the Bulgarian history is written in Greek and occupies the upper part of a marble column. The lower half of the same column bears a later Latin inscription dedicated to the Norman commander Robert de Montfort, who died in 1108. No further information about him is known, as far as I know. But if somebody knows him, please tell me. I'm quite curious to know something about him. A cross belonging to the Latin inscription separates the two texts, as you see. The column is 1.60 meters high and 0.40 meters thick. This shows that the column used for its preparation comes from a gallery of an early Byzantine basilica in this place, or from the ancient city of Bilis, only 6 kilometers away. We cannot be sure. Since usually their height of these columns is 190 to 20 meters. However, the inscription was not incised directly on rounded surface of the shaft, as are most of the early Bulgarian stone chronicle texts, but was carved and shaped as a pillar. Its upper and lower ends are missing. It became known to modern science in 1919, when the Austrian classical archaeologist Camille Praschnicker announced its discovery in the following circumstances. At the end of November 1917, after having participated in 2 scientific expeditions the previous year in the territories of Albania and Montenegro, Praschnicker was once again sent to Albania, this time under the direction of the newly established Oriental Department of the Ministry of Law of Austrian-Hungarian Empire, of course. His task was to catalogue the ancient and medieval cultural and artistic monuments scattered across the various locations in the occupied areas of the country, to study them, to take measures for their protection, and to conduct trial excavations. He spent the winter months of 1917-1918 researching the regions of Muzakia and Malakastra, documenting archaeological finds primarily around Fia and the ruins of Apollonia, Bilis and Bausch, which were vulnerable due to their proximity to the front line. When Praschnicker visited Bausch, he reported that a large building had already been erected near the ruins of the monastery. We have 2 slides here. Housing the local mufti and the district administration. The building materials for the structure were taken from the ruins of the mount, where a number of medieval monuments were discovered. The marble column with Prince Boris inscription was discovered in December 1917 around the ruins of the monastery, and Praschnicker noted that it was preserved thanks to the intervention of Lieutenant Colonel White. On May 14, 1919, Praschnicker delivered a report on the inscription at the Vienna Academy of Sciences, following which he published it. Based on this publication and on an estampage, as will be shown later, in his turn, Vasil Zlatarsky wrote a rather extensive study on it, published in the magazine Slavia in Prague in 1923. It is well known that Praschnicker and Zlatarsky offer a different reconstruction of the text according to the interpretation of the part of a word preserved on the upper right edge. One variant, what we see is Arias, and in it Praschnicker recognized the word Marias, referring to the fact that the local population calls the excavated Mount Saint Mary, or St. Mary, or the monastery. On the other hand, several considerations, such as comparison with other Greek inscriptions from the 9th century found in Bulgaria, which mentioned the name and title of the ruler, led Zlatarski to the conclusion that the word in question is Bulgarias. We have only part of it here. So we have two totally different interpretations of this semi-distracted word in the upmost corner of the inscription. So, given the indicated in the end of the inscription year, which from the creation of the world, which corresponds to 865, 866, and the mention of Boris's renaming as Michael, Zlatarski restored not one but 5 other lines on the beginning of the text. He was very brave to do this, actually, but he had reasons of his own, which are not to be excluded. So his reconstruction was under the Roman Emperor Michael. The Bulgarian Prince Boris, renamed Michael, was baptized along with the people given to him by God in the year 6374. After Prashnikov reported the discovery of the inscription, the column disappeared and its location remains unknown to this day. All later publications rely on the transcription made by Prashnikov, who is the only one who has worked with the monument de Viso, and probably Lieutenant White, if he was curious to take a look at what he found. Various theories have been proposed about the fate of the column. Some suggest it was taken to Bulgaria. Others believe it was transported to Vienna, or that it may still be stored in the collection of some museum, such as the one in Durrës. No Bulgarian scholar, including Zlatarski, has ever seen the original monument. In 2023 and 2024, the project on the traces of some medieval Bulgarian monuments in today's Albania, financed by Sofia University and led by Associate Professor Albena Milanova, who unfortunately is missing, set as one of its objectives to investigate the further fate of the column bearing the inscription. One of the first results of the project was the discovery of a plaster cast of the inscription in the collection of the National Archaeological Institute with Museum at the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. According to the inventory book, the copy was made in May 1922 by the Bulgarian scholar Raphael Popov from estampage of the inscription. This plaster copy was mentioned by Jordan Ivanov in his book Bulgarian Antiquities in Macedonia, but it has remained unknown until this day. Our special gratitude go to the colleagues Snezhana Goryanova, Krasimira Karadimitrova, Stefan Alexandrov, Ivan Voykov, and particularly Bisera Tomova, that helped us to find it because copies are generally not entered in the inventory books of the museum. You cannot find them simply. They lay somewhere, but you have no inventory. But still, this was a happy exception. Our search provoked the interest of the museum's authorities, as a result of which a year later, actually now, the copy was restored and the text became clearly visible. And we can reject some current speculations that the year was invented by Zlatarski. I will not cite the professor who said this recently. It's up to him, of course. However, it was not clear who, when, and where made the estampage, from which the plaster copy was executed by Raphael Popov, and thus who was the last person to work directly with the monument. Various possibilities, such as Sofia or somewhere in Albania or in Austria-Hungary, had to be verified. The second part of the project, which was carried out in 2024, was able to answer the question of how the mentioned estampage made its way to Sofia, due to the research made in the archives in Sofia and Vienna by me and my colleague Beloslava Vachkovska, and I'm passing the reins to her.
Thank you. During the winter months of 1917-1918, several options regarding the future of the artifacts found on Albanian territory were discussed in order to prevent them from being destroyed, stolen, or sold by the soldiers. The initial plan of Karl Pač, the director of the Balkan Institute in Bosnia and Herzegovina, was for the monuments to be moved to Sarajevo, which at that time housed the nearest center for Balkan studies and a museum. However, the ideal of the civil administrator of the occupied Albanian territories, August Kralj, gained more support. He proposed preserving the artifacts on Albanian territory and after the war using them to establish the foundations of a future Albanian National Museum. This idea was supported also by Prašniker, whose task was to gather and study all the ancient and other monuments significant to the cultural history of the country. While the conditions for implementing this plan were being established, the need to preserve the archaeological monuments in a safe place, further from the front, remained. More than 80 items, including fragments of sculptures and inscriptions, were transported by Prašniker to Durrës to later lay the foundation for the future National Museum. They were stored in the former palace of Prince Wilhelm von Veit, which at that time was under the control of the Austro-Hungarian military command. In the spring and summer of 1918, Prašniker continued his work, exploring the areas of the ancient cities of Apollonia and Bilis. He collected a large number of artifacts temporarily in Fier and prepared them for transport to Durrës, but in early July 1918, his work was interrupted by the Italian invasion and he was forced to leave the country, leaving also many of the monuments behind. Later he wrote that the antiquities collected in Fier reached Lushnia, but their further fate was unknown to him. On his way back to Vienna, he lost many of his notes and photographs. In the spring of 1918, due to the course of the military operations, the decision was made to transport the monuments to Sarajevo. After the war, the Albanian government revived August Kralj's idea of creating a national museum and entrusted the organization of work for it to Karl Pač, but the project was never realized. The results of Prašniker's journey during the winter of 1917-1918 were published in the study Muzeja und Malakastra, archeologische Untersuchungen in Mittelalbanien. This work includes a catalogue of the archaeological finds he studied during his fieldwork. The catalogue provides detailed information on the artifacts, specifying which ones were transported to Durrës and indicating the exact locations where the others, prepared for transport, were left. In the description of the Balshi inscription, no specific location is mentioned, suggesting that, at least until July 1918, it had not been moved to Durrës or elsewhere. The likely reason for this was its large size. The items moved to Durrës were smaller and could more easily be destroyed or stolen. It is of course possible that in the following years, the column with Prince Boris inscription was nevertheless transferred along with the other exhibits for the future museum. The archive of Vasil Zlatarsky in the Scientific Archive of the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences contains 3 letters exchanged between him and Prašniker. The first of them is from 22nd of February 1922 and was written by Prašniker in reply to an unknown letter from Zlatarsky. In this letter, Prašniker apologizes for the delayed reply, citing as reason his desire to send the Bulgarian scholar an estampage of the Balshi inscription. He reports, however, that at that point, all his Albanian estampages were lost somewhere in the Archaeological Institute in Vienna. Along with the same letter, he sent an excerpt from a proof copy of his publication, Muzeja and Malakastra, which contained information about the Bulgarian inscription. This excerpt is also kept in the Scientific Archive of the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. Zlatarsky's earlier letter, which has not reached us, unfortunately, seems to have contained his transcript and addition to the text, as Prašniker notes that, due to the lack of the estampage, he cannot comment on them. He also mentions that the estampage had previously been read together with their epigrapher, Rudolf Egger, so there is a certain level of control in it. 2 weeks later, on the 6th of March, 1922, Prašniker sent a postcard to Zlatarsky, informing him that his Albanian estampages had been found in the institute in Vienna, and that he was sending him an estampage of the Balshi inscription. He states that the estampage is in poor condition, as he did not have the proper paper when he made it, but as Zlatarski's reading in addition to the text seemed quite possible. A draft of a thank you letter from Zlatarsky, dated March 28, 1922, has also been preserved. He expresses his gratitude for the excerpt from the study Muzaki and Malakastra, which has helped him to determine more accurately the location of Glavinica and to resolve important issues related to the western border of the Bulgarian Empire, the work of Saint Clement of Ohrid, etc. He also thanks for the estampage of Prince Boris's inscription, stating that he will keep it at the Archaeological Institute in Sofia, and that although it does not allow for a clear reading of the first line, it still provides a good idea of the outlines, size, and shapes of the letters. Furthermore, Zlatarsky informs that his work on the content of the inscription has been completed and is about to be published. This refers to his article on the newly discovered inscription, which was published in 1923 in the journal Slavia. The preserved brief correspondence between the two scholars reveals how the estampage of the Balsh inscription ended up in Sofia. Based on the estampage, in May 1922, Rafael Popov made a plaster cast, which is still kept in the collection of the National Archaeological Institute with Museum at the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. From the letters, it can be concluded that at least by the time they were written, that is February and March 1922, the column with the Balsh inscription was not in Vienna, though this does not exclude the possibility that it was transferred there at a later stage. The letters provide no indication that Prashnikar had the original. Had this been the case, he would certainly have been able to comment on Zlatarsky's reading of the inscription, regardless of the fact that the estampages were lost in the institute in Vienna. Based on Prashnikar's comments on the poor condition of the estampage due to the lack of proper paper when it was made, it seems likely that it was created on-site in Albania. Furthermore, in the first letter, Prashnikar mentions that Rudolf Egger participated in reading the estampage, not the original, suggesting that the original was not in Vienna, at least at that time. It seems more likely at that point that the column with the Balsh inscription remained in Albania and was later transferred to Durrës with the other monuments or transported to the museum in Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for these very important evidences. And now we will pass to Dr. Vasil Kenekejiev, who will speak about notes on the interpretation of the archaeological data from Al-Ajah Monastery.
Hello, dear colleagues. First, I would like to thank the organizers for the kind invitation to participate in this wonderful scientific forum. In the next few minutes, I will discuss a rather popular archaeological site near the city of Van on the Black Sea coast. It is a medieval rock monastery dating to the broad period of the 12th, 15th century. Today it is known as Al-Ajah Monastery, a name given during the Ottoman period. The monastery and the area in which it is located is an open-air museum, part of the system of the Varna Regional Museum of History. My specific interest in Al-Ajah Monastery began with the renovation of its museum exhibition that took place in 2023, a process in which I participated. In connection with it, my colleague and co-author, Natalia Eneva, and I worked with a lot of archival materials for the site, pictures, texts, paintings, etc. Particularly important were those documents and photographs that relate to the history of the monastery's transformation into a museum site in the 20th century. Meanwhile, the other co-author, Martin Volchev, contributed new accurate geodetic documentation, plans and cross-sections, for the first time in many years, by the way. I would like to provide you with some context. In the 1890s, Aladja Monastery attracted the attention of Karol Škorpil and the Darmadanci, his Varna-based club of people interested in archaeological antiquities. Later, in 1901, Škorpil initiated the establishment of the Varna Archaeological Society, which in turn established the Varna Regional Museum in 1906. Aladja Monastery was among the first sites studied by the society and soon became one of the major tourist sites in the Varna region under the management of the Varna Archaeological Society and the Varna Museum. Since then, it has consistently been among the most popular cultural sites in Varna. Despite early interest in the site, it has never been fully and thoroughly scientifically studied. As a consequence, there is no detailed scientific publication of the site. Indeed, Karol Škorpil and his associates from the society provided brief information about the monastery in several early 20th century publications, but those texts were far from the idea of a scientific article. Later publications dedicated to Aladja Monastery are popular in style and aimed at the general audience. The only real exception was the paper by Georgi Atanasov and Dimo Cheshmedjiev, published in 1990. Later, Atanasov used the material with minor changes in his other publications. In the 1990 article, the authors tried to present and analyzed all the available scientific information about the monastery. In many ways, the article is extremely useful to this day. Unfortunately, however, on some topics, the information presented and conclusions there are not correct. There is nothing special about this, but the problem is that in the next 35 years after the article, no other author seriously dealt with the Aladja Monastery. Thus, repeating all observations and conclusions turned into facts. My main goal is to conduct new studies on several issues related to Aladja Monastery, involving various colleagues of mine as collaborators. An important part of the work is related to archival information, and it is here that the connection with the topic of this conference lies. The results of one of these studies, dedicated to the frescoes in the monastery, are briefly presented in an article published in the new issue of Art Studies Quarterly. Here, I want to draw your attention to another issue, which is about the architecture of the monastery and its interpretation. I will be even more specific. I will discuss the initial factual information on which the interpretation can and should be based. This is a small but key topic. As will become clear shortly, the initial information about the monastery's architecture contains error and omissions that compromise important parts of the interpretation of the site as we know it until now. I will proceed straight to the point. During the first decade of the 20th century, when the monastery was transformed into a tourist site and a kind of an open-air museum, partial changes have been made to the rock architecture. A caretaker was appointed to the monastery and he lived there. For his needs and for the maintenance of the site, several rooms have been built into the rocks. To make the rooms, the rock was further cut out. Grooves were also cut into which the front walls of the new rooms would lie. Apart from this, new stairs were cut in some places and in others steps were made of stones. Also, wooden doors and other constructions were installed in various places. Some of these modern interventions are mentioned in archival documents. All these innovations in the architecture of the site are clearly visible on numerous old photographs. Careful examination of these documents and images allow us to trace the chronology of construction activities until the middle of the 20th century. Now, a report by the famous architect Kamen Goranov, who worked in Varna, the report was from 1975, reveals important details about the later interventions on the site. According to this report, in 1963, a series of major activities began aimed at renovating the site and turning it into a modern open-air museum, All this culminated in the registration of Oloja Monastery as a cultural site of national importance in 1967. Goranov mentioned that it was then that the walls of all the new premises were demolished and that the site was restored, as he says, as far as possible to its original form. It should be noted, however, that traces of the early 20th century premises are still clearly visible. The problem is that if the visitor is not familiar with the recent history of the archaeological site, he would confuse the original rock architecture of Oloja Monastery with the modern rock carvings. And this is the problem, actually. The article of Atanasov and Cheshmedjiev was published about 25 years after the transformation of the site, mentioned by Goranov, a period in which there is still no detailed publication on Oloja Monastery. For me, it still remains unknown why the authors did not receive information from the colleagues from Varna Museum about the activities in the first half of the 20th century. In any case, the article confuses the original design and the results of the interventions from the beginning of the 20th century. This in turn leads sometimes to interpretations that are, at best, not based on archaeological facts. In the following decades, up to now, there were again no serious publications by other specialists. Meanwhile, in the sphere of popular culture and tourism, old interpretations from that article were uncritically repeated and they formed a kind of scientific mythology. Let me now illustrate all this with some examples with pictures. This sketch by Karl Skorpil is from the late 19th century. Note that only the western part of the first floor of the monastery was documented. There is no information about the eastern part where the hypothetical refectory and the crypt are located. At that time, the upper level of the monastery was not reachable. This is, by the way, the new plan. From the archives, we know that Varna Archaeological Society made the second floor accessible in the beginning of the 20th century. A path was cut in the cliff, approaching the chapel from west. This is the path here. And on this painting from 1912, you can see the path here, the green line. It was then that in the western end of the floor, a new room was cut for the needs of the caretaker. From south and east, that room was closed by walls. Just a short note. You know, if you are familiar with the monument, this is the chapel with the wall paintings. It is original from the Middle Ages. This part, though, is modern from the 20th century.
Now it's missing.
Yes. Today, we should note that the western part of the large premise in front of the chapel, in fact, does not belong to the original plan of the monastery. By the way, all these pictures are from the Varna archive and the archive of the Museum of Varna. And you can see also the dates. In some cases, it's a period, not an exact date. And here, this is an interesting detail, a man who is walking along the path to this level. See here the figure. On the lower floor, there are many things to comment. Let's start from the largest monastic cell. It was closed by a wall. You can see it here and here. However, if we compare the present layout with the sketch by Skorpil that I showed you earlier, it seems that the shape of the cell was not altered. The holes and the grooves in its southern end, on the other hand, could be connected with the 20th century wall. More interesting are the modifications in the eastern part of the first floor. In the beginning of the 20th century, the easternmost cave, which is also the lowest part of the complex, was in fact at the level of the ground. You can see it here in the first picture. This is because a thick layer of stone debris was formed in that area. Later, when the Archaeological Society removed the debris, the level of the cave became too high above the ground, and therefore new stone steps were constructed. It is logical to assume that this was the original access point to the rock monastery. However, there is no exact archaeological evidence about that. This is the modern steps. The steps were renovated in the middle of the 1960s, the first picture, but soon after they were removed and replaced by the modern metal staircase in the western end of the site, which stands today. Almost half of that eastern big cave was closed with two walls, thus forming a very large premise. This is one of the earliest modern constructions there. You can see it here and here. Today, a piece of the front wall still stands. It functions as a pillar, and it is believed that it belonged to a medieval structure, a room used as a crypt. Indeed, 5 graves were found there, cut in the floor of the cave. 3 of them supposedly fall behind the wall, and the others are in front of it. In one of the latter, Scorpil found a ring from the 18th century. Atanasov and Cheshmedjiev argued that the graves within the so-called crypt were used as ossuaries, according to the popular monastic burial tradition, to rebury the bones after a few years. The outer graves were considered more recent because of the ring. This interpretation can be challenged in various ways. Here, however, I want to emphasize the obvious. The wall is a modern structure and not connected to the graves in any ways. The graves themselves may have been from the 18th century, or they may have been medieval and only reused in the 18th century. This hypothesis can no longer be proven because the graves were sealed with cement and in fact destroyed, as you can see on the pictures. In any case, however, this cannot be a crypt of the type proposed by Atanasov and Cheshmedjiev in 1990 and presented to tourists today. Furthermore, without the crypt, the idea of the same authors for a funerary chapel above the cave must be reconsidered too. If we assume that the access to the monastery was through the eastern cave, this would raise the question of where the original entrance from this cave to the next room to the west was. Today there are a few steps there and people think they are original. You can see here these steps. In fact, they were carved in the early 20th century. In the first photo on the slide, you can see the situation before the steps were made. And even here you can see Karol Skorpil. You can see no steps here. It is unlikely that the entrance was there because there was originally a floor above the steps, the floor of the so-called funerary chapel above the steps, and the path leading to the access point to the upper floor. Therefore, probably the entrance was where the inner steps stand today. They were built or rebuilt, we cannot say, in the early 20th century near the hall that connects the eastern cave with the next premise to the west. Unfortunately, it is hard to say whether in the Middle Ages there were steps there or not. When the room in the eastern cave was built, the hall with the steps was one of the 2 entrances to it. It was closed with a wooden door. You can see here the door, and this is the situation now. And this is the place of the destroyed floor above the new steps. The last space I will comment on is the one that the supposed entrance leads to. It is large and used to connect the various parts of the monastery. The rock premise was interpreted by Atanasov and Cheshmedjiev for the first time as the refectory of the monastery, connected to a small kitchen. Various grooves, ridges, and holes in the rock have been cited as evidence for this hypothesis. However, it should be taken into account that they are all traces of a large room built on this site in the 20th century. You can see it on the slide. The room was demolished in the 1960s, and this picture shows the situation shortly after the demolition. And this is the situation today. In conclusion, I would like to recall that the main task of the research behind this presentation is to clarify and specify the factual basis on which interpretations of the architecture of Al-Ajam monastery should be made. In the article that I hope will follow, the results of all modern activities at the archaeological site will be presented in detail. This, I believe, will provide a more secure basis for future scientific interpretations and, why not, disputes related to the medieval rock monastery near Varna. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this so interesting research with the archives of Varna. And now the last paper in our second session is Professor Mariana Economo, the archival resources as a tool in the archaeological research, the case of monastery of the Archipandes, All Saints, at Achaia. Please, you are welcome.
The archival sources usually serve as the starting point of an archaeological research and subsequently remain a valuable support. In the monastery of the IIIZK-BAS, the archival material becomes a useful research tool in multiple ways. In this paper, we rely on the archival material and combine it to the archaeological evidence in order to interpret 5 issues related to the monastery's architecture, painting, and the personality of its founder. The monastery of IIIZK-BAS is located in the northern Peloponnese in Achaia region, on the slopes of the Mount Erymanthos. It was founded by the monk Nectarios. Externally, the monastery has been a four-sided, 2-story enclosed complex. Inside, the cells, along with other rooms, are arranged in a row, forming elongated wings, either 2 or 3 stories high. There are 3 churches, the Catholicon, dedicated to the Annunciation of Theotokos, and 2 chapels dedicated to the IIIZK-BAS and St. John the Baptist. Additionally, the monastery includes a set of auxiliary rooms essential for its functions, such as the refectory, the bakery, the wine cellar, the oil storage, the olive press, the wine press, the stable, and in a short distance, the water mill. The exterior areas feature 2 courtyards, 3 arcades, semi-outdoor spaces, and roofed corridors. Regarding the painting of the monastery, one can observe 3 different artistic styles. The Nezorites, Diamadis and Evstathios, a local painting workshop from Achaia, who decorated the Catholicon and a few icons in 1731. Second, the painters from the Ionian Islands, probably from Zakynthos, who created the icons for the 3 iconostases around 1734. And third, the Epirot painters, who decorated the chapel of St. John Prodromos in 1756. Additionally, the Catholicon features a wooden carved iconostasis, which is a work of Ionian Baroque. Let us begin with the issue of determining
the founding year of the monastery and identifying its original wing, meaning the first construction phase based on primary and secondary sources. On the eastern exterior wall above the main entrance, we read a brick inscription. June 1728, Nectarios, the name of the founder. Unfortunately, nowadays it has been destroyed. However, in 1987 we recorded and photographed it. The inscription consisted of small fixed bricks fixed in the thickness of the plaster and arranged in a single row. It gives an impression of a brick note, perhaps a hastily made work by a craftsman easily overlooked. Its prominent position above the main entrance clearly indicates an intention to record the date and the founder's name like a kind of a note. The valuable of the information from the primary source of the brick inscription is verified by the monastery's foundation code, a valuable written archival source from which researchers derive information about the establishment, the chronological sequence of the monastery's complex construction phases. More specifically, regarding the monastery's foundation date, the code states, in the year 1728, on May 24, we began a third construction in a place called Selidza, and we built the monastery and the church of the Theotokos dedicated to her holy annunciation, along with all remaining structures surrounding this monastery, including cells and similar buildings, as we can see and observed. This marks the third attempt at a settlement by elder Nectarians and his monks. According to the code, the founding year of the monastery of Archipandes is 1728, which represents the first phase of construction with further phases to follow. Therefore, the archival source of the code, which cites 1784 as the founding year of the monastery by elder Nectarians, confirms the accuracy of the brick inscription, establishes it as a dedicatory inscription and integrates the eastern wind into the initial construction phase. A second issue of concern is the roof of the monastery olive press. The elongated auxiliary space, though unified, is covered by different types of roofing. Half of it has a walled ceiling, while the rest has a flat roof. To interpret this architectural paradox, the researcher must combine the existing architectural elements with information from the monastery codex. The olive press is located at the western end of the northern wing of the monastery's basement. Its floor plan is rectangular with no internal divisions, allowing sufficient space for equipment and enough space for the workers. The eastern part of the olive press is covered by a semi-circular vault, while in the western section the wooden construction of the floor above is visible. This difference in roofing clearly indicates two distinct construction phases. To determine the timeline of these constructions and establish when the olive press was built, we refer to the monastery's codex which states, on April 5th, 1784, we began rebuilding after the collapse of the monastery's tower, along with the lower part of the kitchen, constructed it anew from foundations as it appeared today. We paid the builders working on the lower 500 groschen or 800, including the threshing floor, and there were 34 craftsmen involved. From this record, we learn that before 1784, part of the monastery had collapsed. The codex does not specify which part of the monastery had been destroyed, but it must refer to the northwestern corner of the monastic complex, where the olive press is currently located. This is the only place where two construction phases are visible, and the external appearance of its corner resembled a tower due to the presence of a scalp and a cordon. Therefore, the year 1784 mentioned in context likely marks the construction date of the olive press as well. Additionally, the code mentions the construction of a threshing floor, which likely refers to the circular surface of the olive mill, where the place where the olives were crushed. The fact that the vertical axis to the milestones rotations is not supported by the vault, but by a beam in the ceiling, further supports the theory that the olive press was built in 1784. Thus, the olive press and the tower represent the second issue, clarified through the combination of archival sources, the monastic codex, and observations of the construction itself. The third issue concerns the search of the painters who decorated the frescoes of the Catholicos. No founder's inscription survives in the frescoes of the Catholicos that would have recorded the painters' names. However, iconographic, stylistic, and paleographic evidence allow us to assert with certainty that they were created by the Amadis father and Eustathius, son, two painters from Nizera, Achaia. The same painters also decorated the Catholicon of the monastery of the Holy Trinity in Anovura, also in Achaia, where their names were recorded in the founder's inscription. The initial working hypothesis, based in a critical artistic assessment, it confirmed by written sources. First, there is a commemorative inscription on an icon, not in the Catholicon, but in the chapel of IIIZK-BAS. On the door of the Diaconicon, St. John Chrysostomos is depicted in a full length, and at the lower part of the door, the inscription states, "By the hand of Eustathius in year 1731, referred it to one of the two painters." Secondly, the name of the two painters appeared in legal documents of the monastery of IIIZK-BAS. In 1723, the Amadis, the father, signed as a witness to a sale agreement. Sale of an old church and a mill, 8th of May, 1723, Greveno, the Amadis painter from Nizera, testifies to the above, monastery of the IIIZK-BAS. Later, in 1735, Eustathius, this time, also signed as a witness to the sale of a field to the monastery. His name appeared first in the list of the witnesses. Stathakis painter testifies. The appearance of their names both on the Diaconicon door icon and in the monastery's legal documents confirms our initial assumption that the Catholicons frescoes were indeed their works. These two painters from Nizera are part of a dynamic provincial workshop characterized by conservatism and adherence to Orthodox tradition, while also selectively adopting new artistic trends. Their work represents an interesting part of 19th century Peloponnesian painting. The fourth issue concerns the identification of the painters who created the icons of the three iconostases. The monastery preserves an interesting collection of 26 icons originated from the iconostases of the three churches. The name of painters have not survived. However, their iconography and style link them to the artistic tradition that developed in the Ionian Islands from the late 17th to early 18th century. This is further supported by the written registers of the monastery, in which many names of people from the Ionian Islands are recorded. Most of these names come from Zakynthos, 33 in total, including members of prominent Zakynthine families such as Fuscardi. Moreover, 10 names are recorded from Kefalonia. These are most likely names of donors and their families recorded from recommemoration. The significant number of Ionian names in the monastery's registers indicates strong links between the monastery and Zakynthos and Kefalonia. This connection suggests that the icons originated from these islands, explaining their presence in the iconostasis of the Achaean monastery. The fifth and the final issue focused on the figure of the abbot monk Nectarius. Indeed, who was the monk Nectarius, the elder of the monastic brotherhood and the visionary behind the monastic complex with its diverse and rich artistic presence? We know a few about his life. To outline his character and interpret his choices for the monastery, we must draw information from the archival materials preserved in the monastery. Initially, he was a monk in the monastery of his brother place, Nezera, later possibly driven out by the Venetian occupiers. He and the other ascets returned to the rugged mountains peaks of Erymanthus. From the monastery's codex, we learn that he attempted 3 times to settle his brotherhood in a suitable location. Eventually, following a divine guidance, he founded the 3rd monastery from the ground up, the monastery of the Association, later known by the name of one of its chapels, the IIIZK-BAS monastery. His virtuous life made him respectful even from the Ottomans, who supported the constructions of the monastery. The monastery archives preserved 8 patriarchal letters, primarily confirming its Stavropigial privileges. These letters highlight Elder Nectarius' efforts to affiliate his monastery with the Ecumenical Patriarchate, securing its recognition and spiritual authority. Documents also record the monastery's relations with the monastery of Saint Catherine on Mount Sinai. These ties are established in 1755 when the monastery of IIIZK-BAS took over the management of the nearby Sinai Metochion of St. George and thereby gained protection from the Mount Sinai. Through this connection, Elder Nectarius aimed to establish a spiritual link with the Holy Land and the Mount Sinai, while also securing privileges from the Ottomans, such as tax exceptions, property rights, and autonomy from external interference. The monastery's library, containing 35 manuscripts and over 100 early printed books, was something that he did. This is due to Elder Nectarius, who tried to create a library to the monastery, operating a scriptorial workshop. Archival notes reveal that he visited Mount Athos twice in 1728 and in 1735, purchasing manuscripts. One manuscript containing neptic test bears his note, December 20th, 1728, I purchased this Pateriko book from Xanthopoulos at Mount Athos for 31 groschen, Nectarius, humble monk. In another manuscript featuring the ascetical writings of Saint Basil, he wrote, 1735, I purchased this book at Mount Athos for 8 groschen, Nectarius, humble monk. In 1739, he undertook a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and Mount Sinai, described in his travel notes. In 1748, he wrote his foundational will, establishing the principles of the Brotherhood's monastic life. This will was inspired by Atonic Ησυχασμός at the Philocalic reveal of the Kolivades movement. From the archival material, we recognize that Elder Nectarius was a prominent spiritual person. However, our knowledge is not only confined to written sources. The monastery itself serves as a living archival, offering further insight into its founder. Despite lacking information, Despite lacking formal education, the elder nectarios demonstrate a refined artistic sensibility, appreciating and interpreting the artistic trends of his era. His vision brought together three distinct painting traditions, a local workshop from Nezera in Achaia, Cretan Ionian painters, and wood carvers from the Ionian Islands, and painters from Epirus, creating a diverse artistic landscape of a panorama that reflects both stylistic trends and the eclectic spirit of the 18th century. In conclusion, the archival source of the monastery of the IIIZK-BAS illuminate complex issues related to its architectural and artistic heritage, while also offering a depiction of the character, vision, and the culture of its founder. In the case This case is an example of the broader significance of researching primary and secondary sources, demonstrating how they can function as essential tools for interpreting the complex interaction between religious patronage, artistic production, and the monastic life of the 18th century. Thank you.
Professor Economo. Now it's time to start our discussion. I think it will be better to start with the first paper, questions to the first paper, the second, etc. First, here we have questions to the paper, photographs from the archive of Stefan Bourdieu, Roman architectural detail, a spolium in an early Byzantine constructions. Somebody maybe have questions? I would like to ask a few things. First, maybe, I don't know, the spolia, which was in this private house in Suzovo, this spolia, its provenance is from the island of St. Ivan. It is the same from the archives photos, or it is another spolia which was in this private house.
The part which is spoiled in a private house, dogovor is, I'm sure that it is part of the same monument as the right side. I mentioned doors in the wall, and unfortunately, in Bulgaria there are many doors in the wall which make possible.
Yes, and this so concrete dating, second half of second century, is yours for the first time you are dating this spolia, or they are popular and before with this date?
It's my opinion. As you mentioned in the, that it's your third century, I think it's there.
Excuse me, I'm a little bit in the late period.
May I ask
yes,
something
of course.
additional here?
Of course.
Is it possible this piece to be from not a fragment of that spolium, but a fragment of the same type of component?
No, there is a crack.
It's absolutely the same. So they destroyed the rest and came on with that.
Unfortunately. This monument is published in another book, and I was able to compare
very much. Other questions to the first paper? Okay, let's go to the second paper. Mrs. Anastasova.
Actually, I have a question for the second paper.
Okay, you're welcome.
So,
Thank
you for the very nice presentation. It was very interesting. My question is about the archival information about that the two figures that were taken from a lady,
Yes.
and then the lady kept the rest. So, in the archival information, is there more details about what the piece looked like before they took the sculptures?
No, the information in the archaeological report, which I showed as well, is quite the same as the issue of Bulgarian Institute from, I don't know, 1915, I guess. So the information, the article is quite the same. I don't have any more information about that piece, and that's the reason why I believe that the whole thread is part of the artwork. So
we cannot say whether the three pieces were together or they were like separate pieces actually.
no, nothing. There is no information about that, and it's quite strange because we don't have any information about the faces, about the position of the foot. So I don't know. I believe that the archaeologists haven't seen the piece in its original condition. So maybe the block with the image of the face was separate from this. We can see.
Because otherwise they can break it actually.
Yeah.
Which would be very strange for archaeologists to break it at the piece.
And the information about the face features is missing, so I believe they haven't seen it.
And in connection with that, I was thinking while you were reporting that we cannot be sure that actually this connection between the pieces, this interpretation was correct. Because if those were separate pieces, it could be the idea of the lady that they were set in such a way that the third image was between them on a left of some kind. So can we be sure about the position of the pieces if we get such small amount of information?
Actually, I can't be sure about that because I haven't seen it. I believe they haven't seen it. So this is my interpretation about these pieces of.
And the keystone. The keystone was very interesting. And yeah, I was thinking if it was a separate thing, it could be even originally above them or somewhere else.
It could be broken. I don't know. It's really strange that we don't have more specific information about that because when you are working on field, even if you are part of some museum and you are called to take a look at some situation, you can make some notes which you can publish, and in this case it's quite strange that we don't have any more information. And that's the reason why I believe that the archaeologists, the Koshkar, haven't seen the whole piece of what they made. So my main thesis is that this interpretation is possible, and I believe it's true. The iconography of Victory is putting some red on the head of someone. It's strongly connected with the image of the emperor, so you don't have many options about interpreting that iconography and the whole monument. But the discussion is open, so.
Thank you very much for very, very interesting hypothesis and very possible hypothesis of identifications. And now we are going to the new evidence about the famous disappeared inscription from Balsha. Yes, Mr. Vitalios.
Just to ask for a small precision, is the year 1922, was it the last year that the inscription was in situ, in Balsh, and then it disappeared. But or is there any evidence later that the inscription was still in Balsh or something?
You answer?
This is, I didn't understand it very well, just I would like to hear it again.
Actually, the last year for which we are sure that the monument was in Balsh is the winter of 1917.
The winter 1917.
Yes.
About the correspondence that is from 1922.
At that time, Balsh apparently had only an Esther Balsh in Vienna.
Ah,
He did not have
only.
the original, yeah, because in the letters he writes about the Esther Balshes that were first bought in the district in Vienna, and then he sends an Esther Balsh to Zadarski, but there is no indication in the letters that he had the original.
So the inscription disappeared in a certain between 1917 and 1922, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps between some time in that period. So in the spring of 1918, Russia did transport a lot of monuments,
Yes,
the smaller
in
monuments,
Durs.
exactly.
Durs, yes.
There was no indication in this book, in this
If the inscription was among these objects, yes.
It probably wasn't, because for every monument that was transported, it indicates that it was transported, or for the monuments that he had prepared for transportation, it indicates the place that he left them. And for the Balsh inscription, there was no indication for place, so it was probably still in Balsh. So after 1917, 1918,
But did they explain why they didn't transport, why they didn't prepare it for transportation to Durs?
probably because he had no time, because of the Italian invasion. He had to leave Albania very quick.
Yeah, in early July, if I'm right.
Yeah, exactly.
He just fled.
Thank
And
you very
he lost much of his old materials.
Probably it is in a private collection somewhere.
No, it might be in situ actually, somewhere near the Basilica in Balsh. That's why it's important to dig there, and this is already happening. And I'm very happy our Bulgarian team gave enthusiasm
There have been excavations in Balsh.
to our Albanian colleagues to start digging again.
Yes, I would like also to put the question. Here you see the other estampash, which is in the National Museum of History of Tirana. Because when I was there, and the director, the late Professor Mojko Mzekiu, he has kept in his office another estampash on the same inscription, same as our now in the exposition in the National Historical Museum in Sofia. And if then in the 1918 they made 2 or maybe more estampages from the same inscription, maybe it is also some kind of way to search the original.
Let's ask the then director of the museum.
He passed away
unfortunately, but probably they have some institutional memory about it.
The colleagues working in Albania, they know him. It was very famous figure. They said that
unfortunately,
Professor Mojko Mzekiu, and according to his opinion, the inscription has to be somewhere in Albania, not in Bulgaria or in Vienna.
this is very possible.
But the estampash was absolutely similar as the estampash in Bulgaria. Maybe the colleagues from Albania will say something.
We do not know. That's the. There is also another possibility. There is a tradition that has not been historically confirmed, that in the course of the 15th century, on account of wide Islamization of the Balsh region, some objects were taken from there and transported to Berat. For example, the epitaphios, the Glavenica epitaphios. So there is a chance, considering that this is an old, precious thing, inscription to which I suppose, the word honors conferred to them. It's an important. If, let's say, such a case, is true, then there might be a chance, let's say, that this might be found somewhere in Berat.
But it is nice that now there is a new monument, not just a copy, but like a copy in situ, in Balsha. And we have this monument, that historical monument about the Prince Boris.
And we have even a square or street of Prince Boris there named to him in front of the church.
Yes, it's very nice.
Now, of course, the other question.
I would like to ask you something. Perhaps I missed a reference, sorry for this, but I didn't understand the connection of this inscription with the basilica. Concerning its dating or if the basilica was earlier or contemporary.
It's the early Byzantine basilica,
yes,
which continued existing or was rebuilt and restored in Prince Boris times. We cannot be quite sure, but it was found by the Austrians within the area of this huge building. While they were digging trenches.
So you don't have yes, you don't have evidences if there were contemporary, the basilica and the inscription as well.
No.
No.
There's clearly only the Byzantine basis of all this. The first phase was early Byzantine, and then comes the medieval 9th century layer.
No, just for the sake of record, another thing that I do not think, at least as much as have the literature, that has been positively resolved is whether the inscription was actually from that place or was transported to Bals, somewhere else. So, no.
The questions are many and many.
No, this Lieutenant White, whom we already mentioned, found it there during the digging works of the soldiers under his command. He witnessed how they found this in situ. But whether it was transported earlier, centuries earlier, we cannot know.
That's the question.
Okay. Thank you. Very interesting discussion. But let's continue with the next speech of Vasil Tenekidjiev. Do you have any questions? Notes on the interpretation of the archaeological data from Aladja Monastery? Yes.
Not a question. I mean, it's curiosity basically. It's not really a question. Have these archives not been taken into consideration in the course of conservation of the monument?
Come again, I don't understand.
You used a number of old photographs as well as, and these are, clear evidence of how the different construction phases. My question was in the course of conservation of the monument. Were these not taken into consideration?
Well, it is a little bit embarrassing on the part of Varna, but in fact, actually I said this in the beginning of my presentation, no matter how popular the site is, actually it was some kind neglected over the whole century, because we have only one report from the 75 with factual information, one paper from 1990, and all the rest are booklets like this for tourists. This is the case. We don't have strict documentation in our archive, nor in the city archive. We have piles of photographs, but they were taken not for scientific documentation, but most of them were used as postcards. In the 30s, there was a famous photograph in Varna. He was hired, so he made a set of 50 maybe images of the monastery, like of other sites, and we have most of these, even with the description, greetings from Varna. So the thing is that there was a serious campaign to renovate the site in the 60s,
but we have only fragments of documentation about that. So now I'm trying to put together the pieces, and it is embarrassing because such a popular site, we would expect some more systematic documentation, but we don't have. We have a lot of lost information from the 20th century, and this is ridiculous, I can say. Also, I cannot explain why for that paper the authors, Cheshmejev and Atanasov, they came to Varna, they made their sketches and stuff, they consulted the local scientists, but they never received exact information about these archival documents. And I don't know why, but this was in the 90s, I cannot judge anybody.
We can ask them.
I tried, but I didn't receive a clear answer. So anyway, I want to repeat that this paper is still super important, just we have to use it with caution because in some aspects it is not correct because of lack of information. Now we can fill these gaps, and I think that the future debates will be more scientific in this case.
Just a quick reaction. First, congratulations. It was great fun. All what you told us. It's very instructive. And I am to advertise our colleagues' last publication in the Transactions of the Varna Regional Museum of History, which deals on the same way methodologically with the question about the medieval churches in Varna. This is something huge. This is not a journalist. It's huge and scientifically very important. And for me, it was just great to read this publication, and I advise you to take a look.
Thank you, Laura.
And the question by me, since the word alaja means something polychrome, multicolored, is there any evidence that there was in the walls some multicolored effects? You know,
well, the thing is that, excuse me for the expression, but the site, it looks like an ant farm, because it is a vertical cliff, like a wall, and all the premises were cut in the rock, but because the front, the facade is missing today, we can see all the premises not like that, the picture. And the back side of the churches is with remains of full paintings. So in the Middle Ages, well, in the Ottoman Middle Ages, let's say, people passing by, they could see in the rocks, in these cavities, they could see remains of full paintings. Especially those on the upper level, they were not reachable, so they were better preserved even to the present day.
Okay, thank you.
So this was the reason why it's called like that.
Okay.
Can I have a very short question related to that? Do you have any idea of the dating of the old wall of the church itself? The wall that still stands at the chapel. So you suggested that it's older than those, and it still stays, it has been preserved in this reconstruction process, in the preservation process.
I'm not brave enough to say a date in this forum, because this is a history question, but I can say that on the inner side of these walls of the chapel, there are remains of full paintings.
Okay.
According to specialists that studied them in the past, including Liliana Novodinova, they should be dated in the 14th century, maybe even early 15th century. I think they require new study because we have only one short comment from Modul. But in any case, they are medieval, they are not from the post-Byzantine period. On the other floor, on the first floor, there are remains of more paintings, but they are covered with soot. So first, we have to make a good cleaning and conservation before studying the style. But for the chapel, for certain, there are paintings from the medieval period.
Yeah.
It could be a very late medieval period, but still medieval period. Yeah, not 20th century.
Thank you very much. Let's. Oh, yes.
The lady whose name is Alexander.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Very interesting. And,
in Greek, in Greece.
but I think it comes from Ottoman Turkish, this word. Yeah, okay. But by the way, just a very short note about the name. It is believed by historians, it's not my opinion, that the name was given by the Gagauz ethnical group that lives in this part of today's Bulgaria. They are Turkish speaking, but they're Christians. So it is accepted that they gave the name to that place that apparently was considered holy even in the 18th century.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to the last speech, communication. Professor Mariana Economou, if you have any questions about this very beautiful monastery of Aghi Pantes in Achaia, in Peloponnese. Yes, Professor Yakumis.
First, I would like to congratulate all of the papers, because before I just asked the question without mentioning what I feel, this is a very particular enriching, as the morning session as well, and congratulations. I will stand by your paper as well. Yes. Two questions really out of curiosity. I was wondering what is the content of the documents in which painters signed as witnesses. So it says...
They are documents for sharing the meal or legal documents from the monastery.
Yeah. I was curious to know, let's say, what would be the content of these documents that made them, as witnesses. Was it?
Well, the painters were respectful persons, let's say so, and they knew some letters. They could read, they could write, they could sign their names, and so they were chosen to be witnesses.
What I'm trying, let's say, to look is whether the content of the document has anything to do with the profession of a painter. No. Okay, so they are. No. And the second, whether in the archival, in the archives of the monastery, whether there are any contracts with the painters.
No, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Maybe it's documents, payment documents.
For other
yes,
things.
Not to arrange the.
Not for painters.
Not for the painters. Thank you. And it was very interesting how this monastery has connections with Mount Sinai, with Jerusalem, and with Mount Athos. And that we have so many documents and books about it. I'd like to ask you a general question about the relationships between Peloponnesus and Holy Lands. Because what I saw in the specific iconography in the churches, Protestant churches in Peloponnesus, there is something very strange, and maybe it's due only to the connections with Jerusalem. There is a great scene of crucifixions above the western door at the place of the mission of the Virgin traditionally. And many churches in Peloponnesus, at the same place, there is a great composition of crucifixion. What is your opinion, Professor? Yes, because how these relationships between Holy Lands and Peloponnesus reflect on the concrete iconography and compositions.
Yes. This is a wider thing, let's say. During the 18th century, all paintings, not only in Peloponnese, but in all Greece, in Macedonia, in Epirus, in Mount Athos, there are paper icons that travel. So they know some
Drawings.
Yeah, drawings. Yes.
Thank you.
So, to conclude, I think that thank you, congratulations and thanks, many thanks to our speakers. I think that it's time for a break.
Yes. Thank you for very, very interesting speeches.